Hello everyone, welcome to another installment of my Mass Effect multiplayer class guides. This time I decided to do a short little guide on the Drell Vanguard. I think Drell Vanguard is probably one of the least represented classes, in part because he does have one major weakness: he dies very easily. He simply cannot take punishment. There's only one class that can take less punishment, and that's only if you take Hunter side, the geth, geth classes. Otherwise, they have massive shields. So, when playing with the Drell Vanguard, in a way, you are working with and around the principle of your squishiness, as people like to call it. But to compensate, the Drell Vanguard is incredibly quick, very agile. It is overall the quickest, most agile character. So that I wouldn't say it more than compensates for it, but it certainly helps a lot. Now, the Drell Vanguard, of course, requires a lot of practice and skill to get good with it. He's not a class, in my opinion, that comes easily to anyone, and it took me a while to get to the point where I could play it pretty effectively. Mind you, on a solo vid, I'm playing slightly differently than I would in actual game time realities. I have no squad mates to rely on, but the basic principles remain. Now, the Drell Vanguard. Let me talk about the build first. I'll go through the build and then I'll talk about how to apply it. So let's look at charge. Charge is pretty standard. I take the area charge, and then I take weapon synergy, and then I take full barrier restoration. That's, for any Vanguard, pretty straightforward. I had experimented with 50% restoration with 25% chance of no recharge. It works pretty well, but it's not worth it, because if you're going to use charge strategically or as opposed to charge, which you can't really do with a Drell Vanguard, then I would go for barrier restoration. Then, I forgot which order it comes in. You have cluster grenades, which I just ignore. A lot of people rave about cluster grenades. They are really good, but my problem with grenades in general is you're limited to an ammo box, and once that runs out, well, that's it. They are very good, but overall I think pull is much more useful. And I'll talk about pull in a bit, but the fact is, any power that's not limited by an ammo box probably will be, depending on how good the grenades are, an advantage. Cluster grenades are very good. They're great for mobs, they Atmosis, but despite that, I think the advantage is taking pull. Okay, so nothing in cluster grenades, then pull. Go absolutely for the area of effect evolution, 3 meters. That's a massive area, and you'll thank yourself for that. Then what I chose is very important, in my opinion, is the damage over time, because that means that pull becomes a weapon. Yes, it is slow, but you'll see in the video that at various times I'm using pull as an offensive weapon, and you'll see the enemies just floating there and just die because the pull is draining their health. So I would very much suggest that for level 5 evolution. And finally, as you'll see many times in the video, I use pull and charge to create my own biotic explosions, and that's why I would heavily certainly invest in the increased biotic explosions. The passive is kind of a mixed bag. I choose full power to maximize biotic power explosions. I choose in level 4 weight capacity, also to reduce cooldown, damage and power. Sorry, power and force, and then for 5 I choose power and force again. However, I think the heavy pistol thing is superfluous, because I'm using the Talon 4, but even then I still have 184% cooldown, so I go for 10% weapon damage, which is very nice. That really rounds off the character quite well, because then you have 35% overall power and force damage and 20% weapon damage, which isn't too shabby. And finally, fitness. I've experimented a lot with different fitness builds in the Drell Vanguard, and you actually can create a melee build, but you're even squishier, and so I would just go for the increased mobility and increased shields. Every little bit helps. This is after testing both extensively. Yes, Drell melee is pretty good, but it's too situational that you would be using it constantly, and so yeah, that's go full barrier and health. Barrier, yes, barrier and health. And then of course you get the 10% speed bonus, your 20% increased movement rate makes you even faster. So let's talk about some of the principles. Oh, let me also mention why I use Giant and Cerberus. Well, Cerberus is a well-rounded enemy. They're my favorite enemy because they have all kinds of different, toys up their sleeves, tricks up their sleeves. But Giant is just really good for demonstrating. These are, instructive videos for principles. Different maps will absolutely play differently, and so on a map like this, you do have a lot of room for maneuvering, and I think it really shows the strength of the Drell Vanguard. I mean, I can understand people get tired of the Giant thing, but it does demonstrate a principle, and this is what this video is. It's basically demonstrating the principles of the Biotic ninja, if you want to call it that. So, what am I doing with the Drell Vanguard? Well, your primary killer is your weapon, as usual. However, since I invested heavily in pull and biotic charge, you can be very effective creating your own biotic explosions. You'll see it's used to great effect in the video. Pull is used as a weapon because pull will, if you drain their health. Now, a lot of people criticize pull, seen on the forums, it's useless and go. It doesn't take a whole lot to take enemy protection off, barring a phantom maybe. Once their protection's off, they're vulnerable to pull, and they're just helpless. You can use that to create biotic explosions. One major weakness of the Drell Vanguard, apart from his squishiness, is his vulnerability against phantoms. He doesn't really have any crowd control unless you use, say, like GPS or something like that. And I have done that, but I think it's so cheesy I don't bother. So one way of dealing with it, and there are two ways of dealing with phantoms, basically. Three, as Drell Vanguard. One, charge and press your luck, but I wouldn't recommend that because your charge is not. You're not a Krogan. You're the opposite of Krogan. Krogan charge always staggers phantoms. It doesn't happen, but it never happens with a Drell Vanguard. So you literally can get either instant killed or hit by a melee attack right out of charge, and so that's not really worth it. You can try it if you're desperate. You can try that. What I would recommend is the same principle I would use, say, with a concussive shot with a soldier. A pull has a very low cooldown, and so you can spam it. It will force them to dodge, and whilst they're dodging pull, then you're popping shots off them. You're popping their barrier off. Once their barrier is off, they're all yours. Once their barrier is off, you hit them with pull, and then you biotic slam them with charge, create a biotic explosion, they're usually dead after that. That's one way of doing it. Another way, which is more an opportunistic way, because you're not always going to have this case, a situation, but in the video you see, basically pulling an unprotected enemy, and there's a phantom right next, and I forgot what, you'll see it in the video, it's pretty short. And what I do is I pull the enemy, and then I charge into him and create a biotic explosion. That knocks off all the phantom's remaining barrier, and then I'm able to finish off pretty quickly. So that's a very effective way of using it. But pull also has stagger effects. So, and one advantage a pull might have over charge in some cases is it has a much shorter cooldown. Sometimes it's even effective to stagger an enemy and shoot it as opposed to charge. It all depends on what you're doing. The pull is a very effective offensive weapon. It's a defensive weapon in the sense that you can spam it at phantom and keep them away from you. But those are basically the principles in a nutshell. The Drell Vanguard, it takes a lot of practice, but there's not a whole lot to say about it really. Charge, of course, is your bread and butter, but the problem with the Drell Vanguard is you need to really be aware of your surroundings and to charge selectively. If you don't charge selectively, then you will die very quickly. You need to know when to charge. It's the complete opposite of a Krogan. A Krogan Vanguard, if it's spec'd properly, can charge into 90% of situations. I'm not going to give an estimate percentage-wise, but the Drell Vanguard, of course, is a lot more limited. So, but you see all the principles of the video. On a final note, if you're going to use a Talon, I highly recommend any form of bio ammo. You see how effective it is, because the Talon is a pellet, basically a shotgun, sawed-off shotgun. it will almost instantly freeze targets, even if you don't kill them, because you're punching right through their protection. You can't do that with a paladin or artifacts. That's why I would highly recommend the Talon. For those of you who love the GPS that carries any class, then yeah, the GPS is also very good with the Drell Vanguard. But I think it's not quite as fun and not as good of a challenge. So anyway, those are the principles of behind the Drell Vanguard. And yeah, I'll be posting this in the forums, and yeah. So any questions you can post in the thread. Thanks for watching.
Understood. Pick your target. I'm wounded. Down.
Tell me only bleed sweet. Well
Got
done.
one more.
Enemy is regrouping. Enemy force approaching.
Got it. Contact. That's it! Well done!